Good morning, Doug here from the Hundredfold Journey. Thanks again for joining us on this Sundays with Doug as we come alongside of you on your journey, and we're helping you to rewire your brain, build new habits, and create a new identity. Because a hundredfold is about a group of people who are looking to find their true identity, and by doing so, finding God's true identity. You do have the power to choose. So we always like to start with our 10 truths that we're working on memorizing, applying, and meditating upon it. Does anybody want to share anything from this last week as far as encountering one of these 10 truths?
Yeah, I think for me, um, it's kind of weird to say. I think that all of them take place, but I think the one that's been shining the most to me recently is today. Right now is the best moment of my life because it's just like if you just think about how short your life is, you will understand like how beautiful each moment is,
Mm,
and just like going golfing and trying new experiences, like those tiny things that mean the world to me and mean the world to my family. It just gives me so much joy in life. It motivates me to wake up each morning and go, okay, these small moments, these small things in life are actually really awesome and big for you. They might be small for somebody else, but for you, you've learned to enjoy each moment. So that's
mm,
one that I really take heart.
mm. Yeah, because we do have the power to choose what we want to think about. And we're actually talking about we have the mind of Christ in this series, but we can choose to think about the past, or we can choose to think about the future, all of which brings typically fear or anxiety or anxiousness. But when you're living in the now and enjoying the moment, like hitting a golf ball and just enjoying that moment, um, that's where life really is, because you know you can't predict the future.
Yeah, it's kind of just like the other one was just one small one more where I was watching a video of this preacher telling this really young girl, probably like 14 or 15, like, hey, listen, like if you repent today, if you give everything up today, you won't go to hell. It's a guarantee, it's a promise. And
Mm,
that little girl was just literally trying to experience the new moment that she's only been alive for 15 years, and
yeah.
somebody comes up and tells you that, hey, like the only way to not go to hell when you die is to believe this. And I'm just thinking that's like taking away the moment that we're all striving to understand, that in the moment meaning.
Yep.
And it just taught me a lesson, like I feel terrible if I went up to somebody and started saying that to them, taking away their moment in life. So I'm just learning things each day. So I think it's really positive.
Yeah, because literally what that guy did is he took the fear of the future, the fear of punishment, and brought it into the now. And now that 14-year-old is going to have that thought on her mind. And that's part of freedom from religious bondage. That is religious bondage right there. And she's now handcuffed in that reality,
It's
which,
amazing. And what's more amazing is how many people agree.
yeah,
They're just
yeah,
like, yes, she's being saved. Finally, she's being
yeah,
saved. I'm like, dude, she's 14 years old. She's 15 years old. She's already been saved the
that's
day she
right.
was born.
That's right.
That's saving itself. But I'm so thankful that I used to believe that way, and now I don't. Now I see, wow, like
Yeah.
who am I to put fear and not love into somebody, instead of going up to her and say, hey, you have a lot of great potential. You are potential. You're awesome. You're
Mm,
worthy. That girl would have been like, oh snap, like my life is already good. I'm not a problem. There's nothing wrong with me.
right.
Like then that freedom starts opening up. So I'm
Yep.
really grateful for what I'm learning each day
Yep.
about the ten truths, and really breaking them down each day and going, okay, well, I see the things that I don't want to act and become, and I see the things that I do want to
Mhm.
become and act.
That's because life is a mirror which reflects back what you truly believe and think. So yeah, it's a reflection. Thanks, Michael, for sharing. So we are in this series called "We Have the Mind of Christ." which is found in First Corinthians. And it basically says that, there is no separation. We are one with God. We are his temple. We are his body, even down to the point where we have the mind of Christ. So our thoughts are the thoughts of Christ. And last week we did this video, and I'm not going to show it again, but the power of the mind, where Oprah Winfrey through Deepak Chopra was able to, with her focus and energy, to be able to spin the string with a weight on the bottom in certain directions, and she just did that through the power of the mind. So this is kind of what we're starting with in this series, and talking about the power of our mind and the way that God created us. And one way is that we have the ability to affect objects around us. And what Deepak shared with us were several things. And one is that mentally you have to have the idea to want to do it and expect the outcome. And as long as you're not attached to the outcome, in other words, you're worried, you're anxious, you're fearful, as long as you just kind of let it go and say, hey, it's just going to happen, then every cell in your body reacts to that internal dialogue. So by changing your internal dialogue, you can influence the chemistry of every cell in your body. But then you ask the question, but how? So we talked about the double slit experiment, and this was talking about how particles, energy that we've done tests with for over 100 years, when you send particles through a slit experiment, you get two different results depending on whether you're observing them or not. And Michael, you had used the word potential for that 14-year-old. And what the way God has created this is that the particles and the space and the atmosphere, the frequency, the vibration around us are all in a wave form, a wave of potentials. And it's not until somebody observes those particles, that frequency, those vibrations, that then it changes to a particle. It actually changes form into the form that you think it should be. So it goes from a wave of potentiality into something very specific. So again, we won't watch that, but we talked about the atom structure and the proton and the neutron and the electron. And the study that they did was they are able to pull off an electron, which is part of the atom, and shoot these electrons. And again, they would appear in wave form and they would appear in particle form. But it's not until somebody observes it that it changes to a particle form. And I know I'm going through that very quickly, but we did cover this in a little bit more detail last week. So if you missed last week's video, I'll put a link down in the description for you guys to take a look at. But again, the double slit experience has become a classic for its clarity in expressing the puzzle of quantum mechanics. And it's almost impossible to explain why this occurs, except when we start to understand that we have the mind of Christ. We've been given the mind of Christ. And the total number of electrons in the human body is typically 10 to the 28th power. That's 10 with 28 zeros. So we're filled with these electrons. They're in our bodies. They're in the space. They're all around us. So God has given us the ability to observe them and to change their forms. And we talked about this, again, talking about observation, going from a waveform to a particle form. And the waveform has unlimited potential. And one of our 10 truths are we have unlimited possibilities. We have unlimited possibilities and resources. I got stuck on that word. Possibilities and resources. So everything is possible to us. And it's when we observe it and we have that intense focus that it'll change to a particle form. So again, we covered all of that last week. So then we also talked about what are some examples of looking and seeing what you want to see. And we talked about Rachel, I think you talked about gas, possibly running out of gas, and you had the intention of making it to the gas station, and you did. We talked about thinking of buying a certain car, whether it's a Mini Cooper like my daughter had, and then all of a sudden Mini Coopers show up everywhere, whereas before you weren't paying attention to them. So these are all examples of how when we observe things, they become visible to us. It can work on a positive way as well as a negative way. And the negative way is, thinking you're going to get sick and you don't want to miss work. It works either way, positive or negative. So, and we have the control from our mind as to what we choose to think about. So that's where we left it last week. So this week I have another interesting video to watch. And again, this is the how our mind does work and how it controls our body. And it's through electricity and through chemical reactions. And this video is pretty cool. So give me a thumbs up or just say, hey, yes, we can hear it and see it. Okay. I want to make sure I got it set up correctly. Okay. Here we go. You guys can hear that?
Yep. Can hear it and see it.
Right.
The brain is an amazing and complex organ. And while many people are fascinated by the brain, they can't really tell you that much about the properties about how the brain works because we don't teach neuroscience in schools. And one of the reasons why is that the equipment is so complex and so expensive that it's really only done at major universities and large institutions. And so in order to be able to access the brain, you really need to, dedicate your life and spend 6.5 years as a graduate student just to become a neuroscientist to get access to these tools. And that's a shame because 1 out of 5 of us, that's 20% of the entire world, will have a neurological disorder. And there are 0 cures for these diseases. And so it seems that what we should be doing is sort of reaching back earlier in the education process and sort of teaching students about neuroscience, and so that in the future they may be thinking about possibly becoming a brain scientist. And so when I was a graduate student, my lab mate Tim Marzullo and myself decided that, what if we took this complex equipment that we have for studying the brain and made it simple enough and affordable enough that anyone, an amateur or a high school student could learn and actually participate in the discovery of neuroscience. And so we did just that. A few years ago, we started a company called Backyard Brains, and we make DIY neuroscience equipment. And I brought some here tonight, and I want to do some demonstrations. You guys want to see some? All right. So I need a volunteer. So right before, what is your name? All right, Sam. I'm going to record from your brain. Have you had this before? No. Okay. All right. I need you to stick out your arm for science. Roll up your sleeve a bit. All right. And so what I'm going to do, I'm putting electrodes on your arm, and you're probably wondering, I just said I'm going to record from your brain. What am I doing with your arm? You have about 80 billion neurons inside your brain right now. They're sending electrical messages back and forth and chemical messages. But some of your neurons right here in your motor cortex are going to send messages down when you move your arm like this. It's going to go down across your corpus callosum, down onto your spinal cord, your lower motor neuron, out to your muscles here. And that is electrical discharge. It's going to be picked up by these electrodes right here. And we're going to be able to listen to exactly what your brain is going to be doing. So I'm going to turn this on for a second. Have you ever heard what your brain sounds like? All right, let's turn it on. So go ahead, go ahead and squeeze your hand. All right, so what you're listening to, so this is your motor units that are happening right here. Okay, so let's take a look at it as well. So I'm going to stand over here. I'm going to open up our app here. So now I want you to squeeze. Yeah, so right here, these are the motor units that are happening from her spinal cord out to her muscle right here. And as she's doing it, you're seeing the electrical activity that's happening here. We can even click here and try to see one of them. So keep doing it really, really hard. Yeah, so now we've paused on one motor action potential that's happening right now inside of your brain. Okay, do you guys want to see some more? All right, that's interesting, but let's get it better. Okay, I need one more volunteer. Okay, what is your name, sir? Miguel, all right. You're going to stand right here. So Miguel, when you're moving your arm like this, your brain is sending a signal down to your muscles right here. I want you to move your arm as well. All right, so your brain is going to send a signal down to your muscles. And so it turns out that there is a nerve that's right here that runs up here that innervates these three fingers. And it's close enough to the skin that we might be able to stimulate that, so that we can do is copy your brain signal that's going out to your hand and inject it into your hand so that your hand will move when your brain tells your hand to move. And so in a sense, she will take away your free will and you will no longer have any control over this hand, okay? You with me? All right, so I just need to hook you up. All right, so I'm gonna find your ulnar nerve, which is probably right around here. You don't know what you're signing up for when you come up and... So now I'm going to move away and I'm going to plug it into our human-to-human interface over here. Okay, so Sam wants you to squeeze your hand again. All right, do it again. All right, perfect. So now I'm going to hook you up over here so that you get the stimulus. It's going to feel a little bit weird at first. This is going to feel like a... You know, when you lose your free will and someone else becomes your agent, it does feel a bit strange. So I want you to relax your hand. All right, and Sam, you're with me? All right, so you're gonna squeeze. I'm not gonna turn it on yet, so go ahead and give it a squeeze. All right. So now, are you ready, Miguel?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, so I've turned it on. So go ahead and turn your hand. Do you feel that a little bit?
Nope.
Okay, do it again.
Nope. A little bit.
A little bit. Okay, so relax. No, hit it again. Okay. Oh, perfect, perfect. All right, so relax, do it again. All right, so now, all right, so right now, your brain is controlling your arm and it's also controlling his arm. So go ahead and just do it one more time. All right, so that's perfect. So now, what would happen if I took over my control of your hand, and so just relax your hand, what happens? Ah, nothing. Why not? Because the brain has to do it. Now you do it again. All right, that's perfect. All right, well, thank you guys for being such a good sport. This is what's happening all across the world, electrophysiology. And we're going to bring on the neural revolution. Thank you.
All right, pretty trippy, huh? All right, so let's kind of break this down about a little bit. So just how powerful is our mind? So just think about just the very process of your brain being able to control your fingers and just how intricate that design is and how it needs to go down your spinal cord and then out to your body parts and instantaneously. I mean, as fast as I'm clicking my fingers, I mean, faster than that. It's pretty amazing how powerful our mind is. So one comment that he had is that we have about 80 billion neurons, 80 billion inside our brains. Those are sending electrical and chemical messages back and forth from our brain down through our spinal cord to our entire body. It's about an electrical signal or frequency, right? So just as, you know, she's able to control this, you can see that it's electrical based, right? It's a frequency because she was able to control the other person's hand. The brain controls every part of your body right down to your DNA. We get to determine the signal and frequency by way of our thoughts. So again, it all goes back to our choices. What do we choose to think about? What do we choose to believe? What do we focus our eyeballs on and our intention on? Just like changing the waveform to a particle form, we get to determine with our thoughts and what frequencies. And we have the ability to control it, just like we were able to control in that video that other person. But we have to allow or yield our mind to the mind of Christ, which is love. So anytime we talk about the mind of Christ, we have the mind of Christ. That mind is coming from a frequency of love. And what we need to do is yield our mind, right? Because remember, I'm still Doug, but I'm also Christ. There's no difference. We are one. But which thoughts am I choosing to listen to? You could even take this all the way back to the Garden of Eden. when Eve decided not to listen to the word of God, but decided to listen to her own voice, which led to the fallen mindset, right? That we're separated from God. So what we need to do is allow or yield our mind to the mind of Christ, which is love. That makes sense? So in a sense, we let go, we release our free will by choosing to be hooked up, right? Using the analogy, hooked up or controlled by the mind of Christ. So just like in the video where she was making this move here and it automatically moved over here, that's what we're talking about. It's seamless, it's effortless. It just happens when we hook up, when we allow ourselves to have that hookup, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I know physically, right, we're seeing it with a wire, but we need to be hooked up in our mind, and we get to choose what we think. So here's an example here of what we're talking about. So think of yourself as your body and all your cells, the 80 billion neurons and all your atoms, your electrons, and everything in your body. Think of it as a ship. All right, a cruise line ship. And you, with your 5 physical senses, get to be the captain, right? So you're out there with your 5 physical senses. You got your binoculars out, you're scoping things out, you're smelling things, you're feeling things, you're tasting things, you're hearing things, all your 5 physical senses. Now, in the control the control room, where it's speed and where you're turning left and right, your control room is your DNA, it's your body, it's your body parts, right? So what ends up happening is your cells, your DNA, are responding to the brain's signals, right? We just showed that. Your brain is sending electrical frequencies down to your body and controlling it and doing different things. But they're asking the question, how's it going out there? Right? Because they don't have a will of their own. They're responding to the brain frequencies, the electrical impulses, the chemical impulses from the brain based on what we're seeing, what we're feeling, all of that, right? So these guys are down there, and I say these guys, our DNA, our cells, everything that makes our body up, our liver, our heart, our lungs, pancreas, whatever. And they're asking, hey, how's everything going up there? How we answer that question determines how they respond or they react. So what's our answer? Is it smooth sailing? Then the cells, the DNA, are going to respond. Hey, okay, everything's smooth. I don't need to be anxious. I don't need to be worried down here. I don't need to change my metabolic structure. And there's a bunch of chemicals that can go on in your body when you're under stress. They just are relaxed. And hey, okay, we got smooth sailing. They'll just kind of keep it in gear, and they're not panicking or moving or changing. They're just smooth sailing. And it's rather quiet, so I just want to make sure you guys are you're still on, right?
Yeah, we're still on.
Okay. All right.
Yep, still
Any questions up to this point?
Nope.
All right. So we also have this situation, right? So the 5 physical senses, they say, hey, is everything okay? It's rough sailing out here, and they're capsized. And then what do you think those DNA cells are going to be doing in this situation? They're going to be full throttle. They're going to be reverse, forward, backward, left, right, start bailing, start bailing water. Your DNA cells are going to be reacting based on what you're observing on the outside. And if you're indicating that it's rough sailing and the ship is sinking, life sucks, life is hard, I'm never going to make it, or in your case earlier, I'm going to go to hell anyways, God doesn't love me, then all of those thoughts are going to have that electrical and chemical reaction response. Those signals are going to be sent to your DNA. So now they need to act in a different way than they would have if it's just smooth sailing. This is why it's powerful for us to know that our thoughts matter, what we focus on, what we pay attention to. So I can tell you now that the captain of the ship, who is us, and he was looking out with his goggles, and he said, we've got rough sailing ahead. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be terrible. That the eventual outcome is that ship is going to sink. Because that's what he's paying attention to. That's what he's focusing on, is that life is hard. It's going to be difficult. We're running on low ground. We're not going to make it. Then boom, that's what's going to happen. It's going to sink, because the DNA is going to be responding to the signals that you're sending down to the operating room, the control room. So what do we do about all of this? So there was a gentleman, David Hawkins, who created what we call a map of consciousness. And these are different levels as to, well, let me just read it. So we are all born, and this is from David Hawkins, by the way, we are all born with a level of consciousness, an energetic frequency within the vast field of consciousness. And with the map consciousness, we can truly understand the total spectrum of human consciousness, right? So this is pretty standard, right? We're born with a consciousness. We're not like a rock or an animal. We can decide, we can choose, and we have a level of consciousness. Using a unique muscle testing method, Dr. David R. Hawkins conducted more than 250,000 calibrations during 20 years of research to define a range of values, attitudes, and emotions that correspond to levels of consciousness. This range of values, along with a mathematic scale of 1 to 1,000, became a map of consciousness, which David R. Hawkins wrote about in his best-selling book, Power versus Force. Now, I haven't read this book, and I'm thinking, as I've been getting into this, I might purchase this, but it sounds fascinating. But the part that I like about it is this is not just something that was done, just over a few studies. 250,000 during a 20-year period of time, and you can see the different ranges, levels of consciousness. With the map, David R. Hawkins laid out the entire spectrum of consciousness, from the lower levels of shame, guilt, apathy, fear, anger, and pride, to courage, acceptance, and reason, all the way up to more expanded levels of love, ecstasy, peace, and enlightenment. These higher energy fields are a carrier wave of immense life energy. So you can see how he has broken this out, that below courage, below 200, is a destructive energy. Pride, anger, desire, fear, grief, apathy, guilt, and shame. So talk about destructive energy, right? So when you are the captain of your ship and you're looking out with these binoculars and you're saying, hey, how is life out there? What you will see based on what you choose to think about is fear and grief and apathy, guilt and shame. And that is a destructive energy. And what I mean by energy is, I'm sure you've experienced this, that if you've walked into a room of people, and I do this with business meetings. You walk into a business meeting and you sit down and you can just feel the energy in the room, and whether it's a high level or a low level, that's what we're talking about. It's that almost that sixth sense that you feel, that you sense, that you know that there's someone that's angry in this room, or there's someone that's and they're passing fear on to me, and that energy is exchanged. You can feel it. And what David Hawkins is talking about is that we need to be at a higher level, and what I like to call it is love or above, right? In the middle, with reason, acceptance, willingness. It's more of kind of a neutral energy. It's not really creative. It's not really destructive. It's just kind of in the middle. And then when you get to love and above, that's where the creative energy, that's where we want to live. That's where 100-fold is in that realm of energy. So when you're looking out through your binoculars and you're looking at the horizon, you're saying, hey, life is good. I'm in a loving relationship. I'm always in the right place at the right time. God has granted me favor in the sight of those around me. Those are all love and above statements. And you're going to receive the feedback from your body is now going to change based on what you think. So our goal with 100-fold, again, going back to renewing our mind, rewiring our brain, creating a new identity, being freed from religious bondage. No, God is a loving God. He loves me unconditionally. All my needs are constantly met. That's the energy level that we want to be, and share that, spread that with other people. Because when we come from a position of love, which is the mind of Christ is love, then that energy gets extended to other people. And to some degree, just like the controlling of the hand, is that with our energy that gets expressed out, and what they say, it's like 3 meters, it's like 10 feet around us, that our energy can flow out and touch other people's lives. We have that same power that Christ had when he was here. That same love energy, because we have the same spirit that Christ had.
Well, what's crazy about that is that Jesus, our God, experiencing life through Jesus was kind of an eye opener of to sympathize human emotions and sympathize what we go through. And I mean, his whole mission, I feel like, was to make sure that people didn't feel so alone in the situation. It's like that's the way I really think it's. And then finally, we're awakening to, hey, we're all one kind of together, and we should be kind to each other, because you don't want to be against your brain, just like you don't want to be against somebody else because they also have a brain that's just as powerful, and it's working together as one, I think, is what God in the energy ultimately wants us to come to a conclusion, like, hey, we're one people, we're in this together, just like Christ was in it, we're in it, but it's a good thing, it's a positive thing. And I love that chart that you have there.
What's interesting about that statement, which I really liked, is when you have a negative thought towards someone, like I hate you, or you're always mean to me, or whatever, because you have that thought, you are hurting yourself by having that. You're having a destructive energy when you have that thought, even though you don't verbalize it. That thought of anger towards someone is destructive energy. And not only is it destructive because it goes out and it hurts other people, but it also hurts you. So we have to hold every thought captive. In fact, that would probably be a perfect verse for this sheet here. Is God tells us that we need to hold every thought captive. We can't allow the negative, the 200 and below thoughts come into our minds, because they are destructive.
Well, actually, God does kind of allow those negative thoughts flow and run through to kind of show us that we do have control over our mind. Because if we never had negative thoughts, we would never learn that there's a way to control how we can act and think and feel.
Mhm.
So because there's no proof saying that Jesus never had a negative thought, but what people saw, I'm sure, when he had a negative thought was love and not anger coming out to hurt somebody else, if you would say, because being human, that's part of being human. You walk through a desert for 40 days, you're going to have a negative thought in there like, dang, this is hot, this really sucks. But it's, do I give up, or do I keep believing in what I believed in the whole time, that I am one with the universe, I'm one with God and not against,
Mhm.
So negative thoughts are necessary, but to let them rule over your life and reign over your life, and,
Right.
and ruin your creation, your painting,
Right.
that's another thing.
Yeah.
But it's okay to have negative. That's part of a human experience. It's how we use those negative thoughts out of motivation. Oh, I'm fat today, but am I going to go keep calling myself fat, or am I going to go to the gym and tell myself, you got this, I love you, you can do this? That's different.
Mhm. Yep, exactly.
Hey, Michael, to touch on that, I kind of want to agree with you on that whole duality thing. Is that this is my opinion, that to feel anything under the 200, right? That's your vessel, quote unquote, your body reacting to the physical triggers of the world, right? That pride, anger, desire, right? But it's the fact of when your mind doesn't reacts to that in the higher, you know, above 200, that's when Michael's saying that's how your brain is reacting. It's reacting to the negative by being positive.
Yes.
It's you're taking that negativity, but being like, nah, that's just my body, my reaction to the world. But the way I think is 200 and above.
Yes. Yeah, I like that. I like that. And what allows us to do that is being aware that we are aware. So being in the moment, right? So when that emotion comes, where this anger gets rised up inside of you, you're aware now that you're becoming angry. You're right. You're awake. You're alive. You're living in the moment, and you see it for what it is, and you go, "Wait a second, that's kind of weird. I usually don't get anger. What's causing this anger?" And then you respond, Jeremy, as you just said. Then you respond out of love or acceptance or reason. So you don't respond in like, you respond from a higher level.
Actually, so now that you're saying that, that reminds me of a incident I had at a gas station. This guy who started making comments about me and all this stuff, and I completely brushed him off and
Yeah.
all that. He was just like, "Oh, you look so, F word, derogatory word," and I was just brushing him off. But as soon as he was like, "Hey, yeah, I'll hold you down and cut your hair for you,"
Oh, wow.
is kind of when I was like, okay, hey, I'm gonna tell this guy, to shut up now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I reacted with anger, but he was like, "Oh, what are you gonna do?" You know, like trying to instigate a fight. I'm like, obviously nothing, because I'm not an idiot.
Right.
You know, but then I just literally went about my day, and he just kept hearing him rambling on about me, and I just ignored it. I just drove off after I was done putting gas in my car.
Right. So then the test is, how did that affect the rest of your day?
Nah, yeah, it was kind of like I talked about it with some people to get to, being like, yeah, he annoyed me.
Yeah.
Kind of, he got under my skin, but the next day I was just like, whatever. But everyone else around me was like trying to bring up more questions about the
Yeah.
incident. I'm just like, it's already happened. It's
Yeah.
what happened. Ain't no reason to keep going on about it,
Right. Right. Perfect. So the reason I asked that question is, if you start dwelling upon it, and then you become more angry, and then you become a victim, and then you have other people, as you say, come in and ask you questions about it. It can escalate, and then that becomes, it becomes a hold inside of you, right? So not allowing it and releasing it, and seeing it from a place of love, allows you to forgive that guy, forgive the situation, maybe even look at him differently, like, maybe there was something going on in his life. Um, so not allowing it to affect you, emotionally and physically, is the way to deal with it. And sound like you did that perfectly. So what I like to do for myself is I use the term love and above. So anytime I get into a situation, the thought always is love or above. Don't drop below, and allow that negative or destructive energy to come in. Um, so just staying in love and above, and that's the Christ mind, the Christ consciousness. So as you're going throughout your day, and that's the beauty about these 10 truths, because these 10 truths keep you in that love and above state of being. All right, that concludes it for this morning. Any questions before I summarize?
Well, I just have one question. I mean,
Yep.
it is about Jesus. When they meant Jesus was perfect in every way, they weren't necessarily talking about his mindset, were they?
I would think so.
Meaning like perfect, meaning that he's perfect because we're all perfect, not he was perfect because he did every single movement, everything he spoke, everything he thought of was just on time, on the clicker every second. I mean, there had to be a if he really experienced human experience, he would have had a time where he would have been like, hey, you know what? I've had some negative thoughts that have crossed my mind, but the way I handled them out of love, you know?
Yeah. Well, Michael, you sent me that video this morning, which I thought was really good, or it was last night, about the chosen, where
Right.
James and John were coming to Jesus and saying, "Hey, we want to, these guys just spat on us, and they're the Samaritans. We don't like the Samaritans, and let's cast, let's strike them with lightning,
Right.
and basically kill them." So those thoughts came into Jesus, right? He felt the energy from these disciples of his, and he responded completely different. He turned it around and gave them, no, that's not the purpose. That's not why we're here. So absolutely, Jesus encountered that. And I have to say that Jesus was in the 700 to 1,000 enlightenment. Right now, David Hawkins has Buddha, Krishna, and Jesus Christ all at the same level up there, but it's a powerful inspiration, a tractor of energy fields
Right.
that influence all of mankind. So, in other words, he people don't influence him in a negative way. Instead, he influences people in a positive way. So if we call that perfection, perfection, sometimes we think that that has to do with,
Because the thing is it's not. For God, I think experiencing human for the first time, I don't think God had all these rules built and all these things set up, because Jesus was man and Jesus was also God, 100% God, 100% man. That 100% man had to experience life too, in a way. It's really, I know it's God and Jesus are one,
yes,
they thought and they felt the same way, but I don't believe that we are any different even from Jesus's beginning. Like, we're all the same even before Jesus was around. I think his words, his mindset, how he spoke, how he treated people were so powerful during a time where everybody was really sad and hurt. I think inspired generations, you know. But to go and say, hey, Jesus is greater than you and I, his mindset was greater than you and I, everything he did was perfect, we're the same way.
right. So
But
what's the difference? So
that we
what, and this is
believe
a
it
question
now.
for the group, what's the difference? Why was Jesus able to do it and we are not all the time, right? So what's the difference?
Well, we are all the time. Our believing is the difference.
Correct. What else?
Oh.
Rachel, what do you think?
Oh, Rachel's taking care of the kids right now.
Oh, okay.
But she's listening.
We have a mindset of years, decades of teachings from our parents to our church that we were attending, to culture, to social media. All of that has been programming into our brains about who we are and what we are.
Yeah.
And we've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten that I am Christ. God is in me. I am one with him. There is no separation. Jesus, when he was baptized, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased.
Yeah.
He says that to all of us. You are my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. You are my beloved daughter. And Michael, to your point, do we really believe that? So we have to rewire our brain. We have to create a new identity. That identity is the way that God looks at us, not the way I look at myself or the way my parents did or the way culture does, but the way God does. And what Jesus was able to do was 100% absolutely, I'm that person, and then was able to walk that out. When we are there, we have that same ability. So Jesus isn't any better than us. And remember, Jesus was a man, right? He had the Christ in him, just like we have the Christ in us. So we're on a journey, right? So we don't beat ourselves up and say, why can't I be more like Jesus? And look at the things he did. He walked on water, he healed the sick, or whatever.
The crazy part about that is that part of going to the chosen where um Jesus just says these people are believing in me without me performing any miracles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that just is a thing where it's like you may not, I mean, you still see it. People are cured of cancer, people are cured of all kinds of crazy stuff, and all kinds of things happen to people where they can walk again and it's like it is intense how much I'm starting to see alike I am with Jesus instead of how divided I used to believe I was.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, we are one. There is no separation. Just like that electrical connection, right? When we're living from love and above, call it from the 10 truths, those electrical pulses, man, when they're going, the mind of Christ is directing us. He's saying, hey, go talk to that person. And that electrical pulse, all of a sudden your hand twitches, right? and you go do it. It's just natural. It's just easy because you're listening and you're following because it's love and above. So again, we just need to renew our mind to these truths of who we truly are. We are one with God, and we have the mind of Christ. So his thoughts are my thoughts. All right, guys, thanks for all of that. So again, the hundredfold, we talk about this every week. 30, 60, and 100-fold. 30-fold says, I have a mind, but it's corrupt. I can't hear God unless I repent and confess my sins. It's all about work-based, what I have to do in order to be pleasing to God. If I'm not pleasing to God, he's angry with me and my prayers won't be answered. The 60-fold says, hey, I have the mind of Christ. I can do miracles, signs, and wonders. I just need to pray and confess and bring Holy Spirit down so I can do all these things. So it's things that they have to do, and it's all work-based. Whereas the 100-fold is rest-based. I have the mind of Christ. I am Christ. There is nothing I need to do. Just yield to the fact that I am one with him, which includes our minds, that my thoughts are his thoughts. And that's where we live out of the Holy Holies. We're resting, we're in the inner chamber, and then it just comes out of us easily and naturally. That's 100-fold. So this is just a reminder just to continue to meditate and memorize these. But then we also have to ask ourselves the question, how good is God? The way you answer that determines your yield. And to some degree, this is the binoculars. This is the guy on the ship, right? And he's looking out and he's asking the question, how good is God? Is he an angry God? Is he punishing me? Am I going to go to hell? Am I going to go to heaven? You know, what about this? What about that? When I'm looking out with my binoculars and I say, God is amazing. He is that good. He did do all of this for me. There is love. I am one with him. I am Christ. And guess what's happening to my DNA right now? I'm just getting tingles right now. My body is reacting, and there they go. They're keep going, and now it's on my arms. It just keeps going, and it's energy and it's electrical pulses. So my body is now reacting like, yes, everything's good out there. I don't have to be in fear or panic or rage or anger. I can be in love and just rest. And now my body's at rest, and everything is working as it should, as the way God designed it. So again, we're on this journey together. You can go on to 100foldjourney.com and pull down some additional content. And then of course you can always join us on Facebook at the 100-fold Journey. So guys, thanks for joining this morning. Appreciate your time, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.